Okay, thank you all for joining. I think we'll kick off the next discussion. The discussion will be on water industry's role in progressing the energy efficiency agenda. My name is Christopher Decker, and I work with Strategy and here in the region. I've been here the last 8 years, and I'm leading our utilities practice as a strategy consulting firm. What we do is I look at the utilities organizations and look into their strategies, as well as looking into sector strategies and sector governance. Talk a lot about the nexus between electricity, energy, water, as well as food. I think nowhere that nexus is more evident than here in the region, as water is directly comes from the energy input, whereas around the world that may be a little bit more of a gray area. Today it's very evident here in the region. I've got a few slides to show you. One of the areas that I work in is energy efficiency, and we moderated a workshop last year at the WFES where we talked about several key topics in energy efficiency, and out of that workshop came a lot of salient ideas on this topic, and specifically for water. So if you can pull up the presentation for the moderator. So we had a number of key topics in energy efficiency. The first of those topics, if you click through, is smart cities. And this is we had 3 main topics. And the idea of this slide is to show you that one of those key topics when we're talking about energy efficiency was water. If you scroll through, please. Let's click through. Okay, very good. Maybe this one. Sorry, bear with us for a moment. While we're waiting, if you do have any questions throughout the whole presentation, please be sure to submit those questions on the iPad in front of you. And I should be able to get those up here on stage, and if we have time at the end, we'll go through and pose those questions. Okay, so the first of the set of 3 key topics was smart cities, looking at smart grids, transportation, city integration, city livability. All of those topics have an energy perspective, but also a water perspective can be drilled in there. To smart cities. The second topic was building efficiency, looking at comfort management, district cooling was one of the topics that we talked about here, as well as architecture and design of the buildings themselves, lighting, and realizing the buildings of the future. But finally, we came to water, and again, that nexus between water and energy was very prevalent in this discussion. We talked about technical solutions in terms of desalination. We also talked about the demand and how do you balance the demand of industry, irrigation, agriculture, things like this, as well as talking about alternative supply. And alternative supply, we mean gray water, TSE, supplying recycled water to key areas of the demand pool. So I'll drill down a little bit into the energy efficiency in water, which was that third point on the last slide. We were looking at efficient desalination for one, scaling up current technologies, looking at advanced RO, especially reverse osmosis, especially now that we're moving away from the connection between electricity generation and direct thermal desalination, and looking more, because of the nuclear and renewable that are coming online in the electricity sector, looking at other solutions that need to come about in the future. Again, combination with renewable generation I've mentioned, developing and promoting greenfield technologies is another key interest in that technical desalination discussion. Another thing we discussed is on optimizing bulk demand, reducing overall demand of bulk users. That is a water conservation discussion, but in turn, that is an energy efficiency discussion because of the energy input to the water sector. Increasing customer use of alternative sources of water. Again, we're looking at TSE, seawater cooling, gray water irrigation, things like this. These are key topics that were mentioned. Finally, in alternative supply of water, looking at increasing the scale and supply of TSE to the system, so we have the capability of utilizing that in the future. Increasing the availability of seawater for cooling purposes, bringing that seawater to inland to customers so they're able to use seawater for cooling. And optimizing the distribution of TSE and gray water. This is a sector governance overview, putting in the regulations in order to make sure that happens. And finally, utilizing other methods of increasing the supply of water, rainwater catchment, transporting Arctic ice. These were things that were also mentioned in the discussion. It was a very free-form discussion, and we had a lot of good ideas on energy efficiency in water. So taking that, this discussion, and now we have a panel just on water and how water affects energy efficiency, not only here but worldwide. We have a panel that will be presenting over the next half hour, and I think we'll start with Nathan Epp. Nathan's a senior engineer in energy and commercial projects for Goulburn Valley Water. He's pursued water conservation and energy efficiency topics in his home of Australia, as well as Canada, UK, with Thames Water, Scotland, Scottish Water, and has even spent time here with the Masdar Institute. He's currently back home in Australia at Goulburn Valley Water in Victoria, managing the corporation's energy portfolio and commercial projects as a founding member of the Business Innovation and Efficiency team. Nathan was also the recipient of the Victorian Water Industry Association's 2015 Emerging Leader Award. Today, his focus is on the behavioral changes required to effectively deploy an energy efficiency program.
Thank you, Chris. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'll just speak. And I thought particularly that this subject that we're about to discuss is very interesting because it's the water industry's role in progressing an agenda of energy efficiency. And water affects everybody. And I don't just mean individuals, because we all have to, shower and drink water and use the toilet, but it affects businesses. It affects industry. It affects governments. Water is the most important element to life on this earth as we know it. But just as water is intrinsic to our society, energy is intrinsic to the water cycle. So therefore, our advancement or our decline in the way we manage that within our portfolio really reflects the energy paradigm of humanity. So you can see the intrinsic link that we have there. And as an industry, we've woken up to this fact. We've woken up to the understanding that we have a responsibility to manage energy more efficiently. But not only is it the right thing to do, it's also a cost-effective way to do business. But in my opinion, we still do have quite a long way to go until we can call ourselves maybe an energy-efficient, mature industry as a whole. There's still a large part of the sector where energy efficiency or energy management just seems to act as like a tacked-on part to our business or a cost-saving exercise. It's far from being embedded into the day-to-day operational strategy of our corporations. But what I want to talk about is that energy efficiency is not just about buying new stuff. It's not about replacing assets or the next panacea of technology that's going to come along and solve all of our problems. The root, the fundamental element of energy efficiency is changing people's behaviour. Behaviour and cultural change is intrinsic to where the energy-water nexus is going to be. So the first aspect of this is raising awareness within our businesses as to what the true cost of energy is, but more importantly, what the value of energy is to our business, to our communities, and to our customers. And I wanted to relate an example of where this is really it comes to the fore. I was recently involved in a project optimising a pipeline that transferred water from one of our storages to some remote communities in the Alpine area where we service. And the local operations manager came to me. We had quite a confrontational discussion when we were trying to work this out. And he said to me, and I quote, I'll try and use his accent, he says, "I'm not going to compromise my service levels just to save a bit of power." Now, we've probably all had conversations like that when we've been deploying energy efficient projects. But what this guy didn't understand, his ignorance was that this bit of power that he was talking about made up 40% of his operating cost. Not only that, it contributed 60% of the gross greenhouse gas emissions that his part of the organisation was accountable for. So can you see how this ignorance is maybe holding us back a little bit from this energy efficient agenda? So the cycle of viewing energy as a commodity that just comes in through a hole in the wall is starting to break down. And it's really good. We've got Adam from WateR here today who's going to talk a bit about the energy benchmarking projects that they have done, which is about raising awareness and really building some sort of picture of what energy does look like in our business. What is the value of energy? So having that awareness is key. But secondly is about allocating appropriate resources to changing this. Now, we talk about appropriate resources. What I mean is a person responsible at the right level of an organisation who can affect change and has the ability to strategise on energy. Now, when you think about it, most water corporations, most water utilities might have a whole department dedicated to something like document formatting, making sure your report is in Franklin Gothic 12 point. How much more important is energy? And by extension, if you look at the resources that an organisation invests in their energy, it really tells you how important that product is to that organisation. My final point is somewhat reflective of the evolution of our businesses as water utilities, and that is energy management and energy efficiency is a corporate problem. It is at the highest level of any water business, or it should be. Now, usually energy efficiency programs have often sprung from greenhouse gas initiatives, which usually originate maybe from an environmental team or something like that. And you end up with a situation, perhaps, where you get a bunch of people with an environmental management or an environmental scientist skill set that are trying to operate as mechanical engineers and advise on energy efficiency. And a really clear example of where that is failing is the proliferation of unnecessary variable speed drives across our industry. People being oversold a piece of equipment that's going to solve all of their energy problems. So making sure that the right skill set is being informing the right people is very important to that. So energy efficiency is a corporate priority, and it should start from the very top. It has to dictate strategy, it has to dictate policy, operations, and also investment. And my concluding phrase, if water is the lifeblood of society, then energy is the lifeblood of water. So, thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Nathan. I think one of the questions I had, maybe we'll deal with this afterwards, is on behavioral change and how you can drive behavioral change, or actually maybe change behavioral change to behavioral adaptation, and have people doing the same things they're doing today, but have an energy efficient outcome, rather than spending the energy to change their behavior, just adapt it. So maybe we'll think about that and come back to that later. Next up, we have Ashley Rowe. Ashley is the Chief Executive of British Water and the Managing Director of Airbiz Limited. Formerly Managing Director of Information and Performance Limited, Business Development Director of Severn Trent, and a director of a number of companies worldwide. His experience spans many fields, including development of innovative technologies and processes, international business development, privatization, public-private partnerships, private sector participation, regulation, strategic planning, marketing, contract development, and client liaison. He has an in-depth knowledge of the organization and management of major public water and wastewater systems, and today his focus is on the value of water and how many countries do not value it compared with, say, a utility like electricity or telecoms. This value perception is institutional, technical, economic, social, and he'll give you a few points on that. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Christopher. I want to just tell you, first of all, about British Water, because you're probably saying to yourself, what is British Water? Well, we're a trade association, and we bring together many companies, around about 200, in the water sector in the UK, who provide supply services to the big corporations in the UK, such as Nathan's type of industry. So we have contractors, we have lawyers, we have consultants in our membership. So we represent that trade body around the world. We represent those trades around the world. And what I want to try and do is pick up this value of water. And you're probably saying to yourselves, well, what's this got to do with energy? And I will also say one thing. I haven't talked to Nathan about it, but I'm going to pick up some of the things that he's already said. If you look at those two photographs, they are also to do with energy. The dam there will probably produce hydroelectric energy as well as water. And there's been an awful lot of energy expended by that person with that water pot on their head, because they spend a lot of time in the developing world actually moving water around like that so that they can actually live. So we need to do something about how people value water. And in many developed countries, people take it for granted. They turn on their taps and water comes out, they flush the toilet, and things disappear. So I want to just pick up a few points about value for society. Society overall does not value water, in my opinion, or the services of providing it to your house, to your industry, and whatever. The customers, do they value the service? Well, maybe, maybe not, but a lot of people I know in the UK happy to go out and buy a bottle of water, but they'll get thousands of bottles of water for what they pay for a cubic metre of water through their taps. But they don't like paying the bill for that water. They'll also, I also pay more for my mobile phone at home in England than I do for my water service. Very strange. Happy to do that, it would seem. But so we're not valuing water or the water service that is provided at point of use. Politicians, they get involved in water all the time and wastewater. And they use these services as very emotive issues when they want to get elected. They try and push down the value of water in many countries. Won't let the rates rise where they have control over that. And in many places, they do have control. Although in the UK they say they don't, but they do. And then the overall economy, Nathan touched on this, it's something that business has to have water to actually function. And the World Economic Forum last year, I think, said that impairment to water supplies, floods, provision of water is the most serious threat to business in society, in their opinion. And the last little bullet point there is on conflict. And there are a number of areas in the world where water is a source of conflict. And unless organisations are put in place to ensure a fair and equitable distribution of the water supplies, such as on rivers like the Mekong and others, then things can become very difficult. So what are the realities, as I see it? Well, investment in water services, and this is probably pretty much the same in many countries, is about the second biggest capital investment that a country can make. In the UK, railways tend to be more capital intensive, but water and wastewater come a close second. So there's an enormous amount of capital invested in water and wastewater infrastructure. Energy, as Nathan has said, a large proportion of the energy usage in a country is used to move water around and to treat wastewater. I've put measurement on there as a reality because we don't, in the water sector, necessarily measure the water that we use very accurately. We do it in oil, we do it in gas, we do it in electricity, but in water, we don't tend to have the equipment to measure down to the detail that you probably would need if you valued it in the same way as water, as energy, as oil, and so on. Conservation. Well, if we valued it, we would become much more concerned about using it wisely. And I think this needs to become part of our societal change, where we actually value water such that we understand the cost of turning the tap on, of having a shower. A little analogy here in the UK recently, the government have brought in a charge for plastic shopping bags. And they've cut the numbers in circulation by about 60 or 80%, just because people have to pay a very small charge, but people then value not giving them the money for that plastic bag which they're going to throw away. So we need to get that into people's minds, and one area probably is schools, and I think they're doing quite a lot here in Abu Dhabi with the schools program on water and valuing it. And then finally on that slide, construction. If you look at the investment required, there's also a massive amount of expertise needed to provide water services, from construction through to management of the systems. And finally, I'll just leave you with a couple of thoughts about the future. I think we're going to have to look, because I mentioned the amount of infrastructure that needs to be put in place, we're going to have to look a lot more at decentralised supply and treatment of water and wastewater services, much smaller units, probably some things in houses, although that could be some issues around public health which we have to deal with. Another area to look at in the future where we look at value is competition. The provision of water services isn't necessarily, in most countries, a competitive environment. In the UK, the competition there at the moment is comparative competition. It's going to move to a commercial competition over the next few years, which will be extremely interesting. So I should be able to buy my water from anybody that wants to supply it to me, in theory. But there needs to be, I believe, more competition in the sector. And then we need to have a lot more innovation as to how we provide services and how we manage those services. It's not just about pieces of kit that do things in a much better way. I believe there's also quite a big innovation required in management. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Ashley. I think what's interesting about water and its value as compared to electricity is the fact that you can collect that water, treat that water and reuse and store it and reuse it, where it's much more difficult to do that in electricity, and that's something that I think is intrinsic to its value. Next we'll have Elena Barbossa, and Elena is the Chief Executive Officer of Atoll Energy in France. She has worked for numerous corporations, NGOs, political bodies, and social partners before creating Atoll Energy from a bottom-up approach, analyzing the way people use technology before developing with several research partners the technologies that would suit the most and be most earth-friendly. Today, she will introduce how they have revisited thermal desalination using low-grade energy or waste heat, hybridized with solar thermal to provide for sustainable water. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you. So I'm supposed to be the innovator here. Thank you very much to my fellow colleague here that have been presented today. I'm not an engineer, so I won't give you more details about the technology, just a few. I want just to share with you the title of the panel today is that the industry role in advancing the energy efficiency agenda. I think we have a role with our customers to make innovation, right? But with our customers, we need to share, to play our part to make any move and to advance the energy efficiency agenda. So as a corporation, we are trying to make many innovation. Yes, we are trying to sell them. We start to sell our first product, but we also made our small little move towards the environment, and we decide to go carbon-free. And that might be a small move because we are only a 6-people company, but that's our way to make things go further. So the vision we had with my father when we created the company is that when you produce electricity, you waste 2/3 of the fuel that you use. And this wasted heat should be used to provide for many utilities. It should be used for steam, to fresh water, for desalinated fresh water, but also for air conditioning. Here in the Middle East, we have a great need for air conditioning and for desalinated water. We can provide for those kind of utilities with the wasted heat from power generation. This is just a question of good cooperation between the utilities that provide for electricity and the ones that provide for water. We did this solution with the smart integration of renewable energy, and we add solar thermal energy to energy waste from the power of the generation. I will just give you a few figures about desalination, one of the applications we provided with wasted heat. Everybody in the industry is trying to find the best innovation. Everybody in the industry is trying to advance, to use less energy, to provide for more water. Today, energy counts for more than 50% of desalinated water. We should reduce that. If we look at the figure here, we can see that using the technologies that we are using, like evapocondensation and multi-effect desalination, if you use it with solar thermal, it's the most expensive desalination technology in the world. If you use it with free wasted heat, it's the cheapest solution today in the world for 2,050 cubic meter a day. Because when we compare things, it's very, one has to be very careful about the hypothesis. Everybody trying to do his best. We might not have the best solution in the world, but we have a solution that works with free wasted heat. And I think it says that that's all I say.
What's that? Okay, it's still off.
The screen went black.
We've lost the front.
But just to acknowledge and thanks my partner from France, the CEA, the French Atomic Research and Alternative Energy Research Institute, and the CNRS that came up with the technology that we are using today to desalinated water. And I thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Elena, for that innovative approach and explanation. Next we will go with Adam Lovell. Adam is Executive Director at the Water Services Association of Australia. The association is the peak body for the urban water industry, and its members provide urban water services to over 80% of Australia's population. Adam provides national leadership in policy positions for the Australian urban water sector on issues such as industry reform, water quality, climate change, customer engagement, and asset management. He'll be talking today, as Nathan introduced, about the energy efficiency benchmarking around water and wastewater sector. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And, I'll try and, I've only got 8 minutes left, so I'll try and keep it short and sharp. Just last year, we published a couple of reports which are available through our website. Details are on the last slide, specifically targeting energy benchmarking around water and sewage pump stations, and particularly one of the biggest energy users, of course, is wastewater treatment plants. And so the outcomes that we're actually looking for, what are the best practice targets available internationally? Look for the improvement opportunities for each individual utility, of which there's around 33 utilities across Australia, including a couple in New Zealand who joined us as well, and also the potential energy savings. So what did we find? We certainly found that Germany and Switzerland appear to be the leaders in these two spaces, but the room for improvement for us is moving to aeration-type plants, which shouldn't be a surprise for many people in the room. A trend towards recycling, and particularly around desalting, pumping over long distances, which is a really big issue for Australia. Australia is actually the third most urbanised country in the world, and behind Singapore and Monaco. Not many people would realise that. So everybody lives around the coast. So to service some of the inland regions, you've got pipelines many hundreds of kilometres long. Probably the longest one would be between Perth and Kalgoorlie, which is around 450 kilometres long. And you can imagine you could make a cup of tea by the time the water actually arrives in Kalgoorlie. It's that warm, it's around 45 degrees, so keeping a chlorine residual is another... Anyway, that's a long story. Ageing systems, of course, is a big issue for us as well, and we're finding with asbestos cement pipelines and some of the old, very old cast iron pipelines are becoming an issue. Where does that relate to energy? Well, increased pumping costs as greater leakage and and other fun parts along with that. What we found in the wastewater treatment plants, and sorry, the font there is actually quite small, was that there are big energy efficiency availabilities there. We tried to estimate what the savings could be in water and sewage pumping stations around the country. For water, surprisingly, came up at around $73 million a year, which is quite a significant amount of efficiency. And for sewage, not a surprise, maybe at that sort of rate, because that's most of our sewage systems are gravitated systems, so not that much more pumping. What we're finding, though, is as wet wipes take off, particularly in our bigger cities, they're creating a lot of sewage pumping issues. And you can see there, rather convoluted graph, but anything above that red line offers opportunities for improvement. So you can see quite a significant number of those data points sit a good distance above that red line. So what we're trying to do here, this is our first round of our efficiency benchmarking study. So we're looking for our utilities to identify what their specific energy efficiency gains could be individually. And obviously we're looking for them to come down towards that red line, which is the most efficient point they could be. SA Water have done a huge amount in their energy efficiency program. SA Water is a fully integrated water utility, covers water, sewage, recycled water and desalination. They also provide huge pipelines, so their pumping costs are massive. And they've undertaken quite a big program looking right around their portfolio. I think one of the really emerging and most exciting things that we might be able to offer into the future as water utilities is almost becoming not water utilities, becoming essential service utilities that provide waste, energy and water services. And there's one particular couple of situations emerging in Sydney in one of the infill areas where they've taken out some old infrastructure, put in brand new buildings, and they've got one utility, which is not the local water utility, providing water, energy and waste services in an integrated way. So there's some exciting things for the future. Water Corporation also looked at these type of graphs that came out of the report and really tore apart their whole energy balance on this particular wastewater treatment plant so they could understand what their efficiency gains could potentially be. I'll keep it nice and short. We've got a couple of minutes for discussion there, and that's the way you can contact us and look up the reports if you need to.
Thank you, Adam. So we've had a quite diverse discussion over here, but I think it really does hit on the key topics in the nexus between energy and water. We have, the changing or adapting behaviors and how that impacts water conservation as well as energy conservation. We have quantifying and qualifying the value of water is very important. We have innovation, both technical and as well as behavioral. So we had both of those discussions on this panel. And finally, we have understanding how the energy savings can impact that nexus and quantifying that from a sector point of view in the benchmarking study down at the end. So please feel free to put in any questions you have into your iPad, and I'll try and get to those. I don't have any just at the moment. Have you had a thought on how you can adapt behaviors rather than trying to change them?
Oh, certainly. I think probably there's two key elements to it, I would say, and the first element is about data. I saw some of the previous sessions spent a lot of time talking about the Internet of Things and collecting a lot of data and understanding what you can measure, you can manage is important to it. And providing these tools to the operatives, to the people who are making decisions, is key to them gaining an interest or gaining some sort of authority in managing the energy that is within their portfolio. But conversely, it's also about making people accountable for that too. So the instance of that ops manager who sort of said, oh, I don't want to save a bit of power, the reaction of the business is, okay, well, let's make him accountable for his expenditure then. How does those key elements of his P&L impact on his personal ability to manage that team? So accountability and data are probably the biggest drivers in that adaptation.
Right. And holding them to certain KPIs that, that will drive what you're trying to do. Ashley, have you had a thought on reuse and how that enters into the value of water equation?
Yes, I think, as you say, reuse is going to be something that we need to look more at. There are a number of places around the world where reuse is done on a really big scale, but there are some issues with people's perceptions as to where the water comes from. But reuse on a smaller scale, on the British stand that we have here, we have some people that have produced a shower that actually reuses the water. So they save about 90% of the energy and 90% of the water, which is a very interesting innovation. I said that not just technical innovation, but management innovation, but that seems to me to be a way to go, and that will be in the property, which is keeping everything on a very small scale. But reuse is something that we do need to seriously look at and to change people's perceptions on reusing water.
Thank you, Ashley. I think we may be out of time, but let me try and squeeze one more. We do have a question from the audience, and this is for Elena. This is what is the cost of using the free waste heat in your product?
The investment cost, I guess. That is the question. Yes. Well, we are all aware of the petrol price here, so I cannot give you a straight answer, but I need to look at the details of how you produce your electricity, and then I can give you an answer about the price of harnessing the wasted heat. But our target is a 5-year return on investment. 3 to 5 years. It depends of the needs, actually. Desalination is one of the cheapest ways to do steam. Then you go for cooling, then you go for desalination in terms of return on investment. If you only need is desalination, that's going to be a 5 to 7 years return on investment at the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Do I have time for one more? Somebody give me a... Yeah? Okay, so we have one for Adam. Let's go down to why are there greater energy savings initiatives in Europe, or at least more publicized, compared to Australia? Are certain policies in place creating drivers for change?
I think comparatively, yes. I think Australia's gone through a bit of a roller coaster ride policy sense. In the late 2000s, we had a left-leaning government came in, went to implement an emissions trading scheme and a whole lot of associated energy schemes with that. That government got chucked out. We got a right-leaning government who didn't believe in that as much and threw a lot of those programs out. So I think one of the key lessons that we've learned in Australia is just the swinging about, or the roller coaster ride we've had in policy, and everybody is looking for certainty of policy and bipartisan approaches to policy settings, and therefore programs that are rolled out. The government's certainly keen to talk to us at the moment. They've got this thing called direct action, where they're actually funding people to go out to reduce emissions, And that feeds right, our co-digestion programs feed right into that sort of potential program there as well. But on the whole, the biggest problem has been around policy. So everybody's looking for certainty in policy.
Very good. Thank you all for joining, and I think we'll conclude our discussion on energy efficiency. Thank you all for joining on the panel. I think it was a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.